Well, hello everyone again. Welcome to the final event of Career Month 2023. We are so grateful that you have joined us, whether this is your first event or you've been with us for the whole time. We are really, really grateful that and excited that you have been spending this month with us, growing in your career and making some exciting headway into the wonderful world of work in 2023. We know January can be a slow, cold month, and so having something to look forward to and some plans in place is always a good idea. You are joining us during Networking Night, which is our chance to really get together and first off, reflect back on everything that we've learned in this month, but also remind ourselves of what a great network and community we have here at UChicago, and the opportunity to meet some amazing alumni and figure out, some advice and some next steps for yourself as well, based off of what they do and what they can provide for you. We're excited. We're going to get to the networking portion, but first, we are going to talk to someone who knows a lot about UChicago, a lot about networking, and a lot about career pivots, which we know is an answer and a question for all of you. Karnika Iyengar, who is a graduate of both the college and Booth, is here to join us to talk to us about her career, her advice for us all. I'm really excited. Karnika is an entrepreneur, a career development advisor, and a social impact strategist. She co-founded one of the nation's largest paid public service internship programs when she worked here at UChicago with David Axelrod at the Institute of Politics, providing over 1,000 internships to students and advising hundreds of students and young professionals. She's worked with over 400 domestic and international nonprofits, governmental, business, social justice, and cultural organizations, including some you may have heard of, like the State Department, the CNN, HuffPost, all those amazing organizations, to create paid substantive internships programs for college and graduate students, which we know can make a really big impact on a student's career and the beginning of their career. She's also developed mentorship programs, international trips, everything that you could possibly do at the IOP. Karnika has had a hand in. She was also at 29, became the executive director of a 501c3 here in Chicago to serve girls who identify as refugees, immigrants, and asylum seekers, to provide them mentors, tutoring, educational resources, and safe spaces. In 2020, she was appointed to City of Chicago's Women's Advisory Council and sits on the board of directors, Refugee Action Network, as the board treasurer. She's done a lot of really amazing things that I can't list, but we're going to talk about. So Karnika, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I actually, funnily enough, I was telling Natalie, I just came from a sort of like a networking reception, and I was like, well, I'm right in the mood. So just to pretend like this is actually an in-person networking, but I'm thrilled that all of you are here. I love that it's a little bit more intimate. So feel free, if you have anything that we're talking about that you want to hear more about, like feel free to put in the chat. And I think Natalie's monitoring those, but thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Like I said, we're gonna, pull questions, anything that you come up with. So please feel free to write in your responses. The first question I have, Karnika, is I listed a bunch of really awesome things that you've done. Can you walk us through a little bit on, how you got to where you are today and the pathway you took from even before UChicago, but through UChicago to the work that you do now?
Yeah, thank you. I know when you have someone else reading, it's always really nice to be like, oh yeah, that I did those things. But no, I've been very, very lucky and very fortunate to have like a very interesting and pivoty career, as maybe you saw if you saw the bio or heard Natalie's intro. Thank you. So I am originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I attended the University of Chicago undergrad. I did political science. I graduated in 2011. I really loved my time there. I studied abroad in Paris, and really, really just kind of, soaked up all of the opportunities and what so many of the wonderful resources that university had. One thing that I kind of always knew that I wanted to do in my career was to have an impact in whatever way, I came to define that. So from a young age, I always thought that was going to be through law. So a lot of times then, like really what you saw, nonprofits or other organizations, you really had to have a law degree as you're kind of backing it to be in those. And that's really what I kind of saw happening. So I graduated in 2011 from UChicago. I moved to New York and I worked as a paralegal, kind of doing the pre-law thing, learning about it. Working until 3 a.m, 7 days a week. But I really wanted to learn about what that world entailed and what it meant for me, what I really saw was that I was going to do that for 2 years, take the LSAT, go to law school, work in big law for a couple of years, pay off loans, and then I would get to actually like, help people and work in those interesting organizations. As you know, this is just kind of one of those things that I'll talk about. It'll be kind of a common thread, I think, with careers. When you're reading a bio, it looks like everything was very, kind of planned out, or that you knew exactly how it was going to go. And that is not the case normally with anyone almost. And so for me, what I couldn't have predicted was that in 2013, I was planning on working a few more months in New York. I was working at Covington and Burling, which is a large law firm there. And I reached out to my, so I was in contact with my career advisor from UChicago, and she's awesome. She's still at the university. Her name is Dylan Siegler. She's terrific. And I was already in touch with her. And then I found that there was this really cool, I heard this announcement, something called the Institute of Politics starting at UChicago. And I lost it. I was like, this is so cool. We had none of these opportunities when I was there. And this is exactly what we would need to have there. It turned out that my former career advisor was going to be working there. And I reached out to her and I said, I'm going to move back to Chicago when I'm done with this. Could you, I would love to help out in any way, because that's what I really saw was missing. Careers that were actually for someone who wasn't coming out of econ, who wasn't coming out of public policy, for them to help them find careers. So she actually said, what if you just move back now and help us start it? And I was like, well, and for me, I'm very much like, I do this for 2 years, I do this, I do that. But I really saw it as an opportunity that I couldn't pass up, and something that meant a lot to me. So I moved back in March of 2013, helped launch the IOP, and that's what really changed my life. I applied. So what I was brought on to was to lead our internship program. As I mentioned, there were, I think when I graduated, there were maybe 30 paid internships in the public service, government, nonprofit world. We were brought on to do that. So me and I and Dylan, and David Axelrod, who led it, who is awesome. He would just like, just kind of start doing this and see how much interest is there. And then we'll just figure out how to pay for them. They're all going to be paid. By the end of the year, we had 150. And that for me was just such an eye-opening moment about the university and about the interest in all of that. But I was thinking, I thought I was alone on campus wanting to go into these careers, but there's so many people that are there just kind of silent because there wasn't a place for them to go. So, a year into it, I applied to law school, and something I've never done either. I sent my application in, and then I thought, and I was like, I actually don't really want to go yet. To be working at this really cool organization, I was actually able to see the difference we were making every single day. Students that would have never been able to take a State Department internship or White House internship because they were unpaid, including many of my own friends. And when we were there, we were able to just fund outright because I told David we need it. And he's like, great, we'll fundraise for it. So I was like, this is the impact I'd always dreamed of, but so I actually rescinded my application for law school, which is never something I thought I would do ever. But I just was like, I don't actually want to be considered. I just want to continue doing this. And so that's really where I just saw things take off. We were able to build so many cool new programs, just have so much support. What I ended up seeing that I wanted, though, were skills in terms of finding out how to scale programs like this. There weren't a lot of programs like this in the country, but also if they were small, and I wanted to know how to grow fast and do that. And for me, I really saw that coming, the skills from business school. So I decided then to go ahead and apply to Booth, because Booth is awesome. I could work there at the same time. Work in my current job and then go to school. I applied and I got in, and it was also life-changing. For me, I thought I would be kind of, again, the odd person out. I would start and I was like, oh, they're all in consulting, they're all in finance. And I understand those worlds, but I'm not from that. And it was totally different. They were like, we want to hear what you're doing because it's different than what we're doing. And I was like, I want to hear what you're doing. So it was a really interesting opportunity for me to see that. I, as again, kind of luck would have it, I was growing there and I thought, okay, we've got kind of everything figured out here. I had led the programs a couple of times. When our director was doing something else, and I'd really gotten into learning how to run our program, even though I was pretty young. I was 23 when I went in, 24, 25. But I do believe you learn the best when you're thrown into something. And so then my boss ended up taking another awesome role over there, but I thought, oh, that's funny because she's the director. I had planned to go to Booth to become this director role in 10 years. And now this job is coming up. But so I didn't know what they would do. I didn't know, but I led the program, all of that. But I also was like, going to school. As you can see from my past as well, there's a lot of times when I'm like just not getting a lot of sleep. And I don't know why. That was a common thread, but it's gone now, which is nice. And then it turned out actually that I ended up being named director by David Axelrod and our current ED, or our ED at the time, Steve Edwards, when I was 26 and a couple of months into Booth. That was probably the most pivotal part of my career. I think it was something that was wonderful and also challenging in that was something I planned for 10 years down the line, and then it was happening there. And I was also only a few years above, kind of the students. But that for me was awesome. I led career development and I really created our career development program and everything that entailed. After I graduated from Booth, I decided I really loved the IOP. I never wanted to leave, but I knew I was ready for something new. I wanted to join a startup because that's what I heard about it in Booth all the time. So I joined Lime, which was, if you all have seen them, you either love them or you hate them, and there's no in between. They're the scooters that you see in a lot of cities. I was brought on to lead our North American operations for colleges and universities, and I really enjoyed it. We also were trying to make it more accessible for students. So for example, students with Pell Grants, that sort of thing, like, maybe you can have subsidized or free transportation. I really enjoyed it. I think for me, it was a little bit different because it didn't have the same kind of impact that I had found in, a university or nonprofit. I also, for me, wasn't as sort of comfortable with where kind of that technology was at the time being, and being able to really, talk about those coming to campuses. And so I really did like it and had great experiences, but I yearned for that kind of direct service again. And then after that, I became the ED, that's executive director of Girl Forward, which is a nonprofit. It's Chicago and Austin. And we worked with, as Natalie mentioned, refugee girls, asylum seekers, and other special immigrant girls through education efforts, English learning, staying in high school, graduating. And that was really, really great. I started in January of 2020, and March was going to be our biggest fundraising month because it's Women's History Month, and everything kind of went a little bit not how we thought it would. So that was a great learning experience for me in terms of how to run something, how to fundraise, how to do all of that. Again, I really enjoyed it. Really loved the impact that we were having, but once again, I kind of craved that and missed that direct service. So I stayed there for a year, got everything in kind of great shape, got it all, so it was running smoothly. And then I launched my own consulting firm in the fall of that. So that's what I'm currently doing. It's called Hira Consulting, and I do social impact consulting. So for organizations that are looking to, have an initiative that helps the community, helps the city, helps something, but they don't know how to do it. There are a lot of well-meaning people out there that are like, I have an idea, I don't know how. I work with them on figuring out, and I work with individuals who are looking to move into social impact careers, or really any career, but just need that kind of one-on-one coaching and that, understanding of career pivots. So that was a ton. So sorry, Natalie. I know that was probably all of them. Hopefully I didn't answer all of the questions, but hopefully that was helpful, just kind of explaining how that, how those pivots worked.
No, I think you said I made you sound impressive, but you just made yourself sound very impressive when you were talking about everything. I guess there's something that you talked about, this idea of pivoting. I think there's a lot of people who are in their job search who are either at a point where they're like, I should make a pivot, or I want to make a pivot, or I know I'm going to make a pivot, but I don't really know how to do that. Maybe it's just to a different industry. Maybe it's, to a whole different kind of career and world. For you, what were the moments that you felt, like I've done what I can do, I've done what I want to do here, and it's time for me to make a change? So I think that's a point for a lot of people that they may be feeling that there's a need for a change, but there's like something holding them back. How did you get past that? There's something holding me back, let me move on phase?
That is a fantastic question. And I had those feelings, and the clients that I work with, like that is such a universal feeling and like kind of a universal challenge that people go through when they're trying to make that pivot. For me, And one thing I will say, actually, as we talk about pivots, when I tell my story, or when, I have people that'll ask like, oh, about your career or something, or even when I see others, but when people ask me about mine, I think on paper and when I talk to, it seems just so smooth, so obvious, so intentional. And in many ways it was. In many ways, like I have a wonderful support system that was always there. It was intentional in that, like, I knew the common thread of what I wanted to be doing. But it is difficult. It's really difficult because it's not like you wake up one day and you're like, yes, it's time to change jobs and I know it. And this is exactly what I do. And I completely believe in myself. And yes, that doesn't happen. And so I think if you're thinking about a career pivot or a career move, some things that I think are helpful to get clarity on. The first is how long you've been feeling the way that you're feeling. And what I mean by that is it's very possible to just be, and I don't mean just to minimize it, but just like that could be the one thing, is to just be burned out, like at that moment, at that season, at that time. And that if you, if you're able to take a vacation or a staycation and you're able to take some time off, get a little bit, back to feeling like yourself, maybe that'll solve it. Or maybe it's something where like, there's something in your role at work that you're like, I could get this expanded a little bit. And actually I'd be really happy with that. So really kind of stepping back and saying like, okay, is this something that's like in this situation that I could change or that I just need to take a break from, or is there something more? So that's the one I would say like is really important. And this goes with that is also how, and this will sound very sort of like, okay, well, I don't know if I feel that way or not, but it's important to really actually consider how you're feeling, what words you're using to describe it. And if you don't know, like ask your friends and be like, am I complaining about work lately? And what I mean by that is there are a lot of times when you feel, you feel just kind of like tired, or you don't feel like going to work or something like that. That's super normal. That's normal. But if it's something where you just have like a very high level of anxiety for every day, every meeting, and there's some reason there that like just makes you feel not excited about it or something like that, that doesn't seem like one of those things I mentioned that maybe just means some time off or some kind of position, adjustment. Think about that, because as soon as you kind of start to have those feelings and there's a reason, like then it's time to maybe start thinking about it. I think also you can be feeling really good. That was also what had happened to some of my jobs. You can be feeling great. You can get excited. I loved working at the IOP. Like I went just for our 10-year anniversary, like last week, and we were all just like friends again, hanging out, and we all have stayed in touch. So you can love the place, you can love it, you can miss it, you can want to be there. It's like graduating something you liked, like high school. You're like, I loved it. I wouldn't have left if I, had a choice. But it's just time. And what I mean by that is like, when you are thinking about projects, when people are mentioning things, are you excited to be like, when somebody says, for example, oh, we're going to do something new at a staff meeting, do you like dread it or are you excited? And that's a really good way, I think, to think about it. So I would say try to take stock of your situation. Number one, see if it's something that can be changed in that moment. Two, see how you're feeling about something. If you're not kind of, if there isn't something that's really obvious out there, see it. If you're dreading work, like there is something there that I would think about. And one thing I will say that with my clients too, like it might not be work related if you're not feeling great, and like exploring that avenue, looking at therapy, like looking at that's also really important. So, it's not always like so easy and black and white with that. So that can be it. But if you are seeing like, I really just don't want to go to work, like I have no desire, and you were someone that should tell you something. And then the last is like, it could just be time to do it. And that's if you're like, you see job postings or you see something, you're like, I'd love to do that. That sounds really cool. I think, listen to that.
Yeah. I think you also talked about something like, I think is really interesting is you're working at the IOP. You thought, let me go to law school because it's always been kind of the plan that I had. And then you took a really intentional step back and said, no, that's, not the step I want to take. I think a lot of people have that question, especially when it comes to like going to a grad program or getting some kind of further education is, how do I know when it's just when I should go and get that degree? Or how do I also know when it's just, maybe I need to build the skills where I am and learn more that way? I think that's a hard question. And I guess I'm wondering how you made that final decision to say that, this has been a dream. I always thought this was going to be my world, but I'm actually going to follow a different path.
So it's a great question. And I apologize in advance because my answer is, so I believe in, everything sort of being transferable to one way or another. So I will have a lesson here, but for me, it was a little bit easier for me to make that decision, because what I will say is when it's something like that and you're thinking now, later, what do I do? I always think like, could I do what I am doing now in, 3 years, in 5 years, in 2 years, however long that grad program takes? Could I get those skills and then be doing obviously like a more elevated version of what I'm doing right now, like after that? So I felt at the time that I couldn't. I was working for David Axelrod, and it was when the Obama administration was there. And so the kind of opportunities that we were getting, the kind of events, all of that, it was a little bit easier for me to answer, because I could say no, that's not necessarily going to be the case, because he wouldn't be the same administration in those many hours. So for me, it was a little bit easier when I looked at that, but I do think that is a lesson that for anybody else, like, just see, is this something that you could do in a few years, and things, would it be normal? And I think most of the time the answer is yes. And so I think if you are looking, if you are in something and you are considering, maybe I'm going to leave now and maybe I want to go do graduate school, I would say really look at the reasons for why you're doing it. Is the reason that you're doing it to escape what you're currently doing, as just like, I'm going to go do that instead? And I see that a lot. I see that a lot with people who are burned out, whether it's in management consulting, in finance, in nonprofits, and they'll say like, I just don't want to do this, I'll just go back to school. That is fine in many ways, because school is awesome, you're learning something. It's also, it's hard, it's difficult, and that you want to be studying, you want to be working and doing a good job. It oftentimes costs a lot. And so you want to make sure that you are making that decision for the right reason. If you are like, you know what, that really excites me, and I hear that all the time, and I get very excited, and that's how I felt. I miss learning, I want to do that. This is really what, even if it doesn't, change my career right now, this is something I want to do and I'm passionate about. Please go for it. Like, you would be wonderful in graduate school. And I think I'm a huge proponent of graduate schools, whether they're professional, whether they're social sciences, anything. But I think going for the right reasons is really important in making that move.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I think there's a part of you that always thinks, especially if you've been planning on it for a while, that you have to take advantage or follow the same path. I think a lot of people have set themselves, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, where it's like, I thought at this point I would have that law degree I'd always dreamed of. But if the opportunities in front of you are something that might not continue forever, then I think it makes perfect sense to not stick so stagnantly to that plan. But you did talk, I think, a really good thing, a big thing you talked about is the idea of skilling up and growing in the work that you're doing, because you obviously have moved up. You moved up at IOP, but you've also moved up in a lot of other organizations through just building your skills. Can you talk a little bit about how someone would do that, and how important skilling up is? So I think that's another big issue that people face when they're maybe looking to move on or move up in the organization, is how do I build the skills to take on more, or to do something more aligned with what I'm passionate about?
Yeah, that's a great question for skilling up. I think there's one aspect of that is more on the obvious side. So people probably think about, which is actually developing those skills, right? So they might take a course or do, maybe some kind of program or something like that. So I always encourage those if it's more of like, I don't like using hard skills and soft skills, but I think that's how usually most people think about them. But if there is something, if it's maybe a softer language, something else you need to learn, take the course that'll make you, well-versed in that, make you learn it. For the other things, I think a lot of it is, honestly, is sort of experience and really sort of taking advantage of your positions in your current situations. And what I mean by that is really kind of looking around, even if you're in a job that maybe you're not super excited about, but that's your job for now, and you like it for the most part. Look around and see what you can learn while you're there, in addition to, of course, your role, and learn from the others there. I think mentors and finding mentors are just such an important aspect of life, honestly. I've been really, really lucky to have wonderful mentors, both in my family, like my parents, my older brother, growing up, my husband now, he's such a great source of support and conversation and all of that. But really my professional mentors too have been such a huge impact. So when I was at the IOP, one of the reasons, coming on as this 23-year-old leading these programs, to have Dylan, Darren, who was our ED, David Axelrod. Like, these are people who, I mean, for David, I'd always seen his name around. I thought was such, this, I was almost kind of, I don't really get, luckily, like starstruck or anything. But the first time I saw, I was like, this is so crazy to see him in person. I had seen him before. And just seeing how he led the organization that he did, and then for the others to lead, the organization or their departments, I learned so much. I was able to model myself after them, and I became so close with David because he's just like a wonderful person. And the reason he is because he made every staff member feel supported. He made all of them feel heard. He attended our staff meetings. It was important to him. I would fall asleep and I would see him on TV the night before, and he would be walking in the next morning when I was walking into work. And really seeing that is dedication to me. That was someone who showed up, cared, asked, like, he knew birthdays, he knew all of that. And I was like, that makes me feel really great. And he truly cares about our programs. Same with Dylan, like the way people really care and kind of do these things. Definitely notice those, notice how you feel. I save an email. Like, I used to save emails when, if somebody said something nice about you, you'd have accolades, and I would save them in a folder. And I'd go back and read those. And I would see wow, I've kind of grown so much. Like, I would see what they had kind of commended, you on early on for something, or like, oh, that was a great presentation you did on that part. And I'm like, wow, and I do presentation on all of them. And so you start to see like how much your skills really grow naturally because you're getting that support and that feedback. And not everybody, obviously, and I've also been in those situations, you don't always have people in charge that are like that. But when you do, like, look around and see, who can be a mentor, who can be someone that you model off of, because those skills, those softer skills of that's really what's going to be so wonderful when you bring on a direct, a direct report, or when you're learning how to present your program. So I would hear the words that they would use to describe like somebody's work, and I'd say, oh, I can use that. So I would describe my intern like that. You're just kind of modeling it. It's like, and that really, really helped me. So many of my skills I just was able to develop naturally through looking and seeing at the skills that I respected and that had an impact, and then try and replicate them as well. That's kind of what I would say for skilling up. And then others, one thing I would say, and I say this to clients, and I even say it for prospective clients, and I of course will lose the business because I tell them this isn't right for them, but I couldn't feel comfortable doing it otherwise. I think there is a limit in terms of gathering new skills, gathering new degrees. Again, if you're doing it in a way where it's getting to the point where maybe you're collecting them, or maybe you're not really feeling confident to go out and find a career in that, it can be, for some people, something that they keep doing. They just keep being like, actually, I'll just get another degree and then it'll be easier to find a job. And then I'll get another one and another one. And that's not super helpful. And sometimes people don't stop you because the people that want your money to do that. But that's an important thing to kind of take stock and be like, is this something that I actually need right now? Or am I just kind of avoiding it's difficult getting out of your comfort zone, going hiring, especially when you're pivoting, because you feel like they don't believe you when you walk in sometimes. But that's what I would say. Make sure that if you're thinking about getting those new skills, it's because you do genuinely need the skills. And you've kind of confirmed that with other people that are in that field. That's a great way to find out too.
Sure. Yeah, I think sometimes as important and as interesting as the graduate degree can be, it can be also a way to put off making the big choice afterwards. So it's important to at least be honest with yourself about which direction you're taking.
Yeah, exactly. I've had people come to me, they're like, I think I need career coaching because I have this and I'm thinking about going into this. And I'm like, I think you're actually good. Like you don't need that right now. I think you just can apply to these certain jobs and kind of do that. So yeah, sometimes it's just that inner confidence, which can be the hardest.
Sure. And in talking about career pivoting, you've obviously done a couple pivots, but you've done sort of, UChicago like to call it a boomerang, where you've pivoted away from social impact and then kind of back into the social impact direct kind of work. What was going through your mind when you were making all these choices to sort of leave what you were passionate about for new ventures, and then to make that return and say, you know what, actually I was in the right direction the first time? Was that a difficult choice, or was it kind of an easy decision to come back and return to the world of social impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think something that I was really happy about was that this term social impact came about. It wasn't there when I was in college. And so it's really just kind of saying things like nonprofity, which is just not a great way to have to describe things. You shouldn't have to describe things by their tax classification or add a Y to the end of it for people to understand what you're talking about. But that was really like what people kind of took it to be. So if you tried to say, advocacy or social impact, people didn't really understand it. But I think for me, I always had that sort of innate feeling or that want or passion to do, which was that I just wanted to be in something that, it would allow me to support myself in that way, but it would allow me to actually, as a career, but that I could actually kind of as corny as it sounded back then, but was to like actually impact other lives or like give back in that way. And, I grew up and now I'm back actually, so you have another boomerang, but again, like growing up in Tulsa, like I just saw so many different situations, so many different kinds of, there's, now of course the history is coming to light a lot more, but I saw so many different aspects of the community that, I thought if somebody was there dedicated with resources, figuring out things, they could probably figure out solutions for some of these or work with the community to get that. So that was always my goal all along. And I think for me, it just kind of came to define itself as different ways. I never thought that I would be leading the internship program or doing something, but I saw all of a sudden these students who would come, especially in UChicago, like different Odyssey programs, et cetera, to be able to give a paid internship at that point. Every day, I don't think one day has gone by since I've left the IOP that I haven't seen at least one student I know either on TV and the newspaper, something else, because they have those careers because of their internships. And so for me, like when I started doing that job, I knew I'd have an impact, but I didn't realize the extent that we could have by working with like young people in that. And all of a sudden I started to see like, oh my gosh, their lives are changing because they're actually getting the opportunities that only a certain kind of, socioeconomic class could get before. So that for me was really impactful. And that's where really I was able to see like, okay, this is awesome because it's changing the world for like, at least our community and then the world for individuals like that. When I left, that was the thread that I always kept. I was interested in trying out, a startup after when you go to Booth, you're always talking about all these cool new disruptive startups. So for me with Lime, like it wasn't necessarily like hadn't really been on the scooter before. But I was like, I really loved the idea of making transportation more accessible at that point. And really it was going to be, it's zero carbon emissions. So that for me was really interesting because again, I thought I can work in a for-profit organization, but we can be doing these other aspects of it. I think what I saw was that when you're working with an emerging or newer technology, it's hard as an individual to feel that impact really early on. And I missed feeling that, which is why I kind of pivoted back into more of a traditional nonprofit sector. And then for what I do now, it's similar. But I think it's definitely just trying to see each time, like what at the end of the day is like the impact that I'm having and what does that look like? And the one thing that I'll stress to everyone, it can look very different. It's how we described public service when I was at the IOP too. It doesn't necessarily mean you're an elected official. You can be a journalist. You can be working at a company that highlights civic engagement. It can look really different ways. You don't have to, it's not one size fits all for everyone.
Amazing. And I think in talking about career pivoting, I know there's a lot of people that is sort of their area of interest. But we're also dealing with I won't say unprecedented, but uncertain times currently with a lot of changes in the job market. So what advice do you have people who are saying, you know what, I found what I want to do. I'm passionate about this, but I'm a little bit like unsure about leaving something for, a job where I think the grass may be greener, but it may also lead to, a really big change that's uncertain. What advice do you have for people that is kind of like, I don't know if I want to make this leap and then find myself without a platform to catch myself on in a couple months if there's a change in the industry or change in the economy?
Yeah, great. Again, another great question. So that is a really, really important one that I've talked to a lot of different individuals about. And I think it's really important. And I think it's important at every stage of life. I think everyone at different ages thinks it's, maybe more important to theirs than someone else's. And I can tell you, I work with individuals who are 2 years out to 42 years out. And they have similar concerns. Some of them are because, they have student loans to pay back. Some of them are because they have a family to support. Some of them are caregivers for elderly parents. Like, it's a whole number of reasons why you might have a reason, or maybe you're just used to the lifestyle you currently have. Many people have reasons why they don't want to kind of make that leap. And the first thing I'll say, never beat yourself up about it. Tune out the noise when it comes to people who are like, and people still unfortunately use words like sell out or use something else if they think like, someone took a career path that didn't represent what they thought was the right thing to be doing to make a difference. Please tune that out and just do what is right for you, yourself, your family, because that's what's most important. So to actually kind of make that pivot, I think it's important if you're feeling that, passion, and you've kind of gone through the reasons and you're like, yeah, this is the time and I'm ready. The way to do that, you don't have to be kind of 100% in. If you can look and find some roles and they seem great, like definitely apply to those, if you can, like keep in your current job doing that. Or if you have been, let go and you still want to make this pivot, but you're not sure if that's going to take longer, you can also take a job, if you find one, if you're able to find one in currently what you were doing, and then still be working towards this other thing. It doesn't have to just be like, you have to make this career decision because this other thing just happened that you didn't have control about. Two main things that I would do to make sure that you're kind of setting yourself up for success and happiness as you're doing this. The first is, do not discount what you are doing when you are not in your office. And I say office because sometimes now it's virtual, it's in person. Your activities that you do outside of it can be just as important as what your 9 to 5 is. And so what I mean by that is I had somebody that was working in finance. She really wanted to move into like more of a classic social impact job. She wasn't sure kind of what yet, but she used to do basically bookkeeping for a nonprofit yoga organization in her city. And she mentioned it kind of offhandedly to me. And I was like, wait, what did you say? And I was like, can you tell me more about that? And I found out how much time and how much energy she was dedicating to that. And I was like, that is something that you can talk about in your cover letters. That's something you can talk about in your conversations. Like, and she was like, but it's not that big of a deal. I only spent a few hours. And I was like, but it's a few hours of your week that you're doing other things. That's something that shows dedication. You only have a few hours free and you're not just kind of, watching TV. That's okay too, but, not doing it. You're actually going and you're doing, pro bono bookkeeping. Like, that's something to talk about. So start to think about like what you do, are there fundraisers you've been to that is a cool organization? Maybe your friend took you and you're like, you know what? Maybe I can volunteer with them for 1 or 2 hours. If in-person doesn't work, virtual does it. There's tons. The organization I ran, you could tutor the girls online. It was very cool. And so think about how to do, different activities in the meantime that can further build your profile when you're applying for something after. So instead of just being like, I'm in this job that kind of has nothing to do with this, if you're trying to pivot into, something else that has something similar, start to work in fields that have some kind of relation there. It'll make you feel a lot better. It'll make you feel a lot more inspired. And what you'll be able to do for those organizations as well is really, really helpful. The second is taking on a bridge role. So I talk about this a lot too. And that's something where maybe you're at somewhat of a senior, pretty high, pretty senior level position, and you want to make a pivot. It doesn't always translate quickly. I would say it can, I do really firmly believe in kind of making sure your narrative is right, making sure you're, talking about the skills that you have. But if you are looking to make maybe a transition sooner than later, maybe think about taking a role that will help you either we talked about skills building, either help you further develop some of those skills that you want to feel more confident about, and or get you into an organization or a role or a path that could be helpful. I think people get worried about that because they think, okay, I'm going to be kind of, stuck there, brought down at so many levels or something like that. So I'd say don't take it like a, big sort of cut that way. But if it is something that seems lateral or a little bit less senior than what you're doing, I think that can be really, really helpful just for you to get yourself in that kind of new arena.
That's awesome. I think if anyone has any questions, please throw them in the chat and we'll get to them. But I have one final question before we get to our breakout rooms, which is, you talked a lot about working with clients and the role of a career coach a little bit. How do you, what are your suggestions for someone on if when is the right time and what is the right situation to start working with your career coach. I think I know myself, and I hear from a lot of our alumni that there's sort of a question of, you know, do I have the right questions? Do I have the right needs? But also, am I overthinking this on my own over here and can working with someone else help? So what is your advice when someone, and I mean, you've been very gracious in saying that sometimes you tell people you actually don't need my help and you should go for what you're saying you're going for. So when is your like best advice for someone for when they should talk to a career coach or start looking for some sort of outside support like that?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think being on the other side, like as a career coach, is really interesting because I've been on that other side so much too. And honestly, I think that is one of the most important aspects of it. I would say when you're looking, well, so first determining whether or not you need a career coach. I would say it's almost in many ways like think of a personal trainer at the gym. Like if you went to the gym every single day, you had your program that you had kind of written out and you go and do all those things, you probably could achieve pretty great results just on your own and you could go do it. If you've never done that before, or, you know, maybe you have an injury or you have something else and you're like, I want some more guidance to help me figure out that. That's kind of like when you look for like a career coach. I think people who think it's going to be someone that'll help them find them a job, I don't think, you know, that's not really the way that it'll work. I mean, that can happen, but obviously that wouldn't be the reason why you would go for that. For that, you would want to go to recruiter. And that's also a very valid place to go to. If you're kind of ready for something, you should seek out recruiters, both kind of, you know, the corporate and executive search and otherwise. But if you're really thinking about it and you're just like, I really want to polish something up, that's the reason to go. Another one is if you're wanting that, I would say like that kind of strategic advice and that insight, if you are thinking about making a career pivot, that person can really help you think about that and what that looks like, and help you speak about it in ways that you might not have thought about it. And then third is also just for fresh new ideas. Many times, you know, I always tell my clients, like, first thing, I'm like, I know everybody asks you, what do you want to be? And you have to have an answer because, you know, you're kind of like full-fledged adult now, but it's okay to just also, you know, find a career coach that you feel really comfortable with. And just be like, what can I do? Like, if you see my background, are there ideas you have for me? And that is something that I love doing with people. I don't think it's something, if you go to someone, they're just like, oh, do what you're doing and I'll help you get that job. And they're just trying to place you. They're just looking to kind of improve their own stats. And that's not something that I think is beneficial to you. For me, I actually, even with the term career coaching is tricky for me because I think there's certain career coaches these days that their whole career has kind of just been that coaching aspect. And I think that's helpful in certain instances, you know, maybe in like learning how to do interview prep or others, and I do that too. But for me, what I use in my own coaching practice is the background and my skills and experiences that I have. I'm able to tell you like, yes, I think you should go into this nonprofit role because I've been in the nonprofit role. Or I'm able to tell you like, yeah, I think you should join this startup. It seems like in a good place. The funding is good because I've been in that. So for me, it's really my personal experience. And that's what I'm able to work with individuals on, from going to business school to being in the other aspect. And so I would say find someone that you feel really comfortable with and that you feel that their background doesn't have to align with yours, but that it's something that interests you. You can feel free. I love giving examples of what my clients have done. Feel free to ask for those. Something that like, I want you to like kind of believe it coming out of it. I don't kind of take everyone I talk to. I do intro calls with people. And sometimes it's because I feel like I couldn't really assist them in what they're doing. They're looking for a very particular thing and that's kind of all they're looking for. And I'm like, then you should really, you know, you don't need to spend on a career coach. You can go to a recruiter. Or if it's someone who I think is actually dealing with, sometimes it's something else in their life that's affecting them. In that case, it's not, I think a career coach is more of like, they will be, if they're good, they'll be your cheerleader and they'll be able to support you and navigate really tough situations. But for something else, it could be that it's actually seeing like a therapist at the same time, because it could be that something else is actually being what's affected at work. So with career, like I would think about it like a sports coach, think of it someone like an advisor to you that can help you with that. I go through I do salary negotiations with people. I do navigating tricky situations at work. I do interview prep. I help people find their dream jobs by reaching out to people they don't even know, but having a very kind of compelling story and doing that. I've had people do complete pivots because I've worked with them on their personal narrative, which is like how to explain what you do in your current role and why that would work well for the next role. So I kind of, love to kind of do it all when I'm working with an individual. But for me, it's really important that they're kind of in the right place to be working on with that. And I think when you go into it with the right expectations and with the right coach, like it will change your life. And I always laugh because I always say I don't want repeat clients because I want to teach you the skills and because that's what my mentors did, teach you the skills to when you're ready for your next role, like we talked about, for you to be able to go and be like, Karnika told me, like, I know what to do. I know how to make my list of organizations. I know how to reach out to people. I know how to do my narrative again. That's my goal for my life. So for me, like, that's a pretty great investment for someone to come in and learn that and then have that control over the rest of their life so that you can make these career pivots and follow that thread that you've always wanted to in your career.
Amazing. I think one question kind of talking about starting your career that came in through the chat
Yeah.
is you talked about starting a business during the pandemic. And what advice do you have on like sales and lead development strategies that you've used for your business that you've also given to your client? Because you talked about finding a company. Sure, there's a lot of online outreach, as the person in the comments has said, but also in-person contacts make a big difference. You talked about the great people in your life that have helped. So
Yeah.
how did you start this business on your own during the pandemic? And what did you find most useful? Was it the online contacts? Was it the in-person contacts? How did that all go?
Yeah, so fantastic. So I started in the fall of 2020. I always thought I would do something like this, maybe sometime years from then, but I just felt at the time it was like that time actually, like I wanted to, and I thought it would give me a great opportunity to really kind of devote time and energy to doing the things I need to do to start a company. So part of it, I think that gave me the confidence to do it were the entrepreneurship classes I took at Booth. Those were really helpful because I took them because they were interesting and I thought I could learn a lot. My friends were in them, they were great, but I never realized what an impact they would have on me in terms of just the confidence I had to be like, oh, I can start this. It's just steps. It's just making sure I'm organized and doing these things. So part of it was building my website, learning how to make a website. The second would be like filing an LLC, like making an LLC or deciding I wanted to do an LLC, what made sense, filing that paperwork, doing that sort of thing. So first, there's the kind of nitty gritty, which I think you can find in terms of finding leads and doing that. So like I said, I've been very lucky. I've actually pretty much done everything has been inbound in a way, actually, up until or still. And that's not to be like, oh, look at me, it all comes to me. It's not at all. It's just more that I think because of my career, I had connected with so many different individuals in these different places that luckily, like, when I started my firm, it was people kind of knew and had to start to reach out. So I actually got my first client on my first day. I had done a speaking event at a firm downtown in Chicago for Girl Forward. I did on Women's Day. And this individual had reached out to me, months later to say like, oh, I heard you talk and I actually wanted to just get some advice for you. And happened on the first day to find my website just by searching. And she reached out to me and I worked with her and she's fantastic. Others had been as well from similar things. They were inbound because they had seen me on LinkedIn. I had told my network, so never ever when you're thinking about leads doing that, make sure your network knows. It can feel really like difficult to be like, hey, but you don't need to even ask for anything in a big way. All you're letting them know is I'm doing this company. This is what I'm doing. If you have anybody that'd be interested in this, please, have them connect with me. And I would say put yourself in their shoes to feel more comfortable. If somebody sent you an email and was like, hey, I just started this company. If you know if anyone who's interested in, handmade earrings, let me know. That doesn't bother you. Like, you're like, cool. Okay, let me go look at their website. Let me look at their earrings. I'll tell my friend. So that's really what I want people to channel, which is like, don't always assume people are thinking of something as a burden or a favor. Just put it out there and see what happens. So in that case, I spread it around, and those can be kind of slower. People a few months in will be like, oh, I heard having it on LinkedIn. I would say that was kind of a big one. I love, I'll do my plug because they didn't ask me to, but I love them so much. For UChicago Alumni is terrific. They're such a wonderful resource for careers. And I had done a lot of different events with them and they had a career coach webpage. And so I was like, oh, you can put my info now. I just started. And I was like, this is great. I get so many individuals who reach out from there. They really as you all have seen, like they put on spectacular programming. And have wonderful people like Natalie doing this. And so I get a lot of leads from there who are alums that reach out to me. I have I would say LinkedIn's probably been my biggest one. And now I think starting to do kind of more in person, but I would say, think of the groups that you've been a part of, think of, clubs you've been a part of, think of your friends, and just kind of start sharing it with them, and it'll become naturally, it'll come inwards. There are other ways to do it, of course. And I would say in that case, like, there's Google, there's Pinterest, there's LinkedIn marketing. They can get costly pretty quickly, but they are worth it. And so I would say, if you are thinking of going that route, definitely talking to someone who's done it before and getting their thoughts.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I don't want to hold off our networking part of the evening anymore, but thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I know I have learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone in attendance has as well. So I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We will